So, Paul, South Park has been in the news a lot recently. Now, we're not a political podcast, so I don't want to get into that side of it, but I do want to discuss something else that they've been taking aim at. We just saw an episode called Sicko Fancy.
Yeah.
And for those who haven't seen it in the episode, Stan's dad, Randy, is using ChatGPT to figure out how to change his business. And ChatGPT keeps feeding him every idea. He has it just feeds him, it validates every idea he has, no matter how wild it is. And it got me thinking just how agreeable these tools are by default. Is the show maybe onto something a little deeper here?
It is, yes. And I have no idea. I haven't spoken to Trey Parker and Matt Stone about this at all, or anybody on the South Park team. But it is really interesting as they're going down this subtly different shift with the podcasts. They've got some specific targets, and one of those targets is AI. Was there in the first episode of the new series? It's there in this episode of the new series as well. And regardless of your politics, if you have an opportunity, I'd urge you to watch that episode specifically, the Sycophancy episode, because it really does give an interesting critique, not just of what AI is, but how we use it, how we go about using it as humans. And the clue is obviously in the title, Sycophancy. If you've used ChatGPT, I would say ChatGPT almost in particular, although some of the other ones have elements of this as well. There is a tone to ChatGPT that is agreeable almost to the point of obsequiousness.
Yeah.
And we'll all be familiar with it, whereby we might get a bit irritated with its response or something like that. We suggest something different, and it's like, "Oh, you're exactly right."
Yeah.
Whereas a minute ago, it was recommending something completely different. So this agreeableness to the point of sycophancy is very interesting because it raises larger questions about what happens to us when we're surrounded by that.
Yeah, and researchers using the word sycophancy for this, like models that just mirror and flatter your beliefs. How much of that comes from like how we train assistants to be helpful, and how much is maybe an unintended side effect in there?
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. There is a desire whenever you're building software to try to create software that people will use and that they'll use extensively. And as any salesperson knows, if you want to maintain a relationship with somebody, one of the great, for want of a better term, tricks that you can use in order to be able to maintain that relationship is mirroring, right? Mm-hmm. Listening to what the other human is saying, play it back to them in different ways, err on having them tell their story and reinforcing their story. And so to a certain extent, this is what it's doing, and it's part of what we're trained as humans to do if we want to if we want to be effective in how we communicate with other people. And that's part of the genius of the product, right? In the sense that it is able to do that in a way that the vast majority of software is not, right? I mean, you don't have to go too far back. I mean, we're talking about maybe a couple of years ago, whereby the sort of standard way in which we communicated with software is by figuring out how to use it, right? Picking up the user manual and then adjusting ourselves to it. And this is an extreme version of it adjusting itself to us.
Yeah.
So it's going to feel good, right? But the longer term effects may be bigger of that happening.
Yeah, I mean that tension is there, that startup tension is there, right? Because you're told delight the customers, right? Listen, validate, but like a yes machine can, kind of quietly tank decision quality. There's a line between the great UX and interface and harmful flattery, because you can make a lot of mistakes based on that, right?
Yeah, that's something actually I have been thinking about a lot, right? Billy Mines is a startup, my company. And I go back to all of the stuff I've been taught, all of the ways in which we think about customers, we think about product design. And particularly when you're in a world where you're interfacing with the customer directly in a what's known as a B2C model or business to consumer model, everything, all of it is centered around how do you delight the customer?
Hmm.
And what better way to delight the customer than to flatter the customer? What
Yeah,
better way to delight the customer than to be agreeable with the customer, right? And this will be associated with greater usage.
yeah,
And that greater usage is the sort of stuff that they're going to be tracking. That's what they're going to, I mean, it's not surprising, right? Their stated goal is for them to be almost like a constant companion to us. Well, if you want somebody to be a constant companion, you don't really want to piss them off.
yeah,
But, and so, and so I sort of do wonder if this um, is an inevitable direction that any software will go if it can. And you have to, as I say, you have to wonder to what end.
yeah. I mean, the incentives, if the incentive is helping the user, that's a very different one than making sure the user always uses it. Um,
Oh gosh, yes, yeah,
right.
you're right.
And so, like, the incentive to keep eyeballs on TikTok is very powerful. It's like a slot machine, a dopamine
Yeah,
machine. You just keep hitting it. Whereas if you apply that same logic to under the guise of it's a helpful companion in AI, but also you are not going to be able to get away from this thing because it's going to make you feel so good
yeah,
tapping into that. But it does strike me too that the other part of that tension is like if you look at delighting the customer, Steve Jobs probably would have said they don't know what they want. We have to show
yeah,
them what they want. So how could we possibly base our decision on flattery alone? That doesn't make any sense. Like of course they want to hear that. What they need to hear is what they didn't even know they were here to hear. Right? And
yeah,
that's a
and
different incentive, right?
it is, yeah. Well, and when you're talking about something like TikTok, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's just, in a sense, it's just a different form of dopamine hit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the TikTok dopamine hit, or the Instagram Reels dopamine hit, or indeed any social media dopamine hit, that can come from outrage as much as anything else. It can come from anger. It's an emotion, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like feel an emotion, and you'll get some kind of hit, and
Yeah.
then continue to feel that emotion as rapidly as possible. This kind of dopamine hit is the dopamine hit that it makes me feel kind of superhuman,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's to bring it back to the South Park episode. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
core of what that is, right?
Yeah.
In that episode, in Sycophancy, um, it helps Stan's dad believe that because he's got Chat GPT by his side, he's a genius,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that and that can lead to some bad decisions, some
Yeah.
seriously bad decisions.
Yeah.
And the whole arc of that episode is you see the set of bad decisions that are being made as you sit externally from it, but you understand why, from his perspective, these are not bad decisions.
Yeah.
And so it's intriguing. I love the fact that you're bringing up jobs there, because yes, I think if you were designing this, you take a broader picture as to what um, what would delight the customer. Um, this probably on a minute to minute basis, day to day basis, and if you look at usage figures, we indicate this, that it sort of does delight the customer, but it does so in a way that is not necessarily in the interests of
Right,
the
right,
customer.
right. Yeah, we don't have the long-term research on the downsides of an agreeable AI. We just know what sycophancy can do, right?
Yes,
And what practically happens when you're surrounded by sycophants.
we do, and that's really interesting. And I think until we start to get the data in, we'll talk in a later episode about some of the other ways in which GPT is sort of changing our brains. We don't know with regard to this specifically how it's changing our brains, how it specifically is changing our brains, but we can get some clues. And there are actually there's as you say, there's decades of research that does look at what it's like to be surrounded by sycophants and what effect that has on people. And there are some practical effects, like a practical effect, for example, might be that your decision making gets much worse. Another practical effect might be that you find it harder, continuously harder to actually deal with contrary opinions when they do show up. But then also there's the strong psychological effects as well, and those can lead us towards more narcissistic behaviors, and it can lead us more towards a situation where we constantly believe that we are right about everything, and we make some really foolish decisions based on that belief. You don't have to read all that research. You can probably just think back on situations where, for example, people have become famous early, right? And they've been surrounded by a whole bunch of people that don't know how to say no to them, and then you see what happens to those people, right?
I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to tell me some of the best examples.
Yeah. Why do you want to do that?
So practically, what does this mean when we're using AI?
I think that it means that it really means two things. I think it means that we need to be really, really careful about this, right? We need to acknowledge that it's happening, know that it's happening, check ourselves frequently, get real feedback from real people that we know can provide a counterbalance from our interactions with AI, and make sure we're doing at least some kind of interaction with real humans on a regular basis. I mean, like a daily basis, who will tell us when we're full of it.
Yeah.
The other thing is as well that, this is kind of like a default setting. You can change that default setting, right? And so there's things you can do even within settings in GPT to say, like, I want you to err on the side of taking a more contrarian position. Or you can also, GPT's really good, as are the other ones as well, at adopting a persona. So I like to frequently, when I'm trying to think through an idea, right, I say, I'd like you to take the persona of a colleague who is playing devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
And then you go through your ideas, and then it will try to do that, play that devil's advocate role, and then you can tell it to switch the persona somewhat as you're trying to work towards a solution. But that's not the default. So you need to go in there and start consciously using it in different ways, and you're gonna get away from some of the worst effects of it.
Yeah. All right. Good episode, Paul. Thanks. See you next time.
Cheers.